Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere. Well, it's not exactly dreamy. You're not slipping into a royal bedchamber or sailing the moonlit Nile tonight. No, you're standing on the greasy stone floor of a 14th century butcher's shop in Paris, ankle deep in blood, lungs full of lard scented air, and eyes adjusting to a room that's seen more animals die than a medieval battlefield. It's loud, it's wet, and it smells like someone boiled every barnyard sin at once. Let's just say, if you thought being a butcher's apprentice was going to be all rosy cheeks and hearty stews, you're in for a raw awakening. And honestly, you wouldn't last a morning, let alone a night. You stand there, frozen just inside the heavy wooden door as it slams shut behind you with a thud that sounds personal. The shop isn't big, but it feels like a living thing. The air is thick, not just smoky, but meaty. There's the scent of blood, yes, but also singed hair, wet wool, and something metallic that clings to your tongue like a bad dream. To your left, a row of iron hooks swinging gently as if whispering warnings. To your right, wooden tables with grooves so deep, you could lose a finger in the history of it all. And ahead, your master, standing like a statue carved from meat and smoke. He doesn't smile. He just tosses you a rag and says, "Start by mopping the brains off the slab. Then we'll see if you're worth the marrow." So that's how this is going to be. You take your first step onto the butcher floor, and the flagstones squelch slightly under your worn leather boots. Welcome to your new life. It's sticky. The shop is built into the side of a stone tenement near Les Halles, the beating, snorting, shrieking heart of medieval Parisian commerce. Meat, fish, fowl, if it once moved, it moves no more here. But somehow, it still reeks of movement. Every shelf breathes with history. There are no windows, just one slit near the ceiling where daylight creeps in like it's afraid of what it might see. Most of the light comes from fire, and most of the warmth from boiling bones. You're sweating already, and you haven't even touched anything sharp. The first task is deceptively simple. Clean the central table. Except the table is the size of a cart, and today's pig has made an impression. The brain matter has oozed into the grooves and dried into a pinkish crust that looks like someone tried to paint a confession. You lean in and start scrubbing. The smell changes as you move, first iron, then bile, then something sweet and terrible that almost makes you laugh out of discomfort. You gag instead. Much more on brand. Keep going. That laugh come later. Usually when you're too tired to know better, your master mutters from behind, already busy peeling skin off a sheep like he's unwrapping a letter. Halfway through the scrub, you glance around and notice something odd. A hole in the wall, just big enough for a rat. But something about it seems intentional. You swear you see something move, but when you look back, it's gone. Later, you'll learn this is the shop's vent, not for air, but for information. It connects to the tavern next door, where meat thieves and gossipers like to eavesdrop on who's ordering what cuts and who's overdue. Paris is hungry, yes, but it's also watching. Eventually, the scraping gets easier. You're numb now, hands red and raw, arms trembling. And that's when the master tosses you something new. A chicken. Still alive. He nods to the block beside you. Do it. You freeze. You've never killed anything larger than a mosquito, and even then you apologized. The chicken stares at you. You stare back. Your master does not blink. You do it. Pearly. The chicken squawks. Flaps. Almost escapes. And by the end of it all, you're bleeding from your wrist. Your own fault. The blade is chipped, and you're fairly certain you've broken some sort of medieval poultry code. Still, your master nods. Just once. That's the closest you'll get to encouragement this week. The rest of the evening is a blur. You sweep bone fragments into buckets that smell like despair. You learn to tell sheep liver from pig just by the wobble. You accidentally step into a trough of congealed blood and don't even scream. Progress. By closing time, you've got sawdust in your nose, bits of gristle on your sleeve, and something under your fingernail you really hope is just beef fat. But the master claps your shoulder. Not bad, apprentice. Not good either, but not bad. You nod, then go outside and throw up in the alley. Congratulations. You've made it through your first day. And tomorrow, they say, the real butchering begins. You wake before the bells. Not because you want to, because the smell of tallow boiling somewhere under your bed has wormed its way into your dreams and dragged you back to the butcher's block. The world outside is still black, but Paris never really sleeps. The alley cats are already yowling by the gutters, and the river, well, the Seine never stops whispering, no matter how early it is. You roll off your straw mat, feet hitting the cold stone, and the bruises from yesterday remind you they're here to stay. Congratulations. You've officially started collecting your butcher's body. The shop isn't quiet when you arrive, it never is. Even before dawn, there's always something breathing inside. Something dripping. The coals are already lit, casting orange halos across hanging blades and cleavers. Your master is there, of course. He nods at you, not because he's pleased, but because you're on time. You'll take what you can get. Good. The cow comes today. The real test. A cow. Not a chicken. Not a piglet. Not a friendly, flappy nuisance that pecks your hands and forgives you by lunchtime. A cow. You swallow something dry and start preparing the block. The cow arrives on a cart, pulled by 2 exhausted oxen and a driver who looks like he's aged 30 winters this week. The cow itself is huge, its eyes glassy and almost calm, like it knows what's coming and doesn't mind. You can't tell if that's comforting or creepy. The guild mandates it, of course. Butchering a large animal must be supervised, precise, and, allegedly, humane. The humane part is hotly debated. Some say a quick blade to the throat does the trick. Others say prayers help. A few say both. Don't look at the eyes, one of the journeymen mutters behind you. That's where your guilt will hide. Charming thought. The cow is tied. Its legs bound and muzzle looped with rope. Your master hands you the long blade. Not your little knife. The long one. The one they call Saint Margaret. Because she cleaves cleanly through sinners and saints alike. You grip it with both hands. It's heavier than expected. Your master doesn't offer a speech. Just, quick, sure, deep, no sawing. And then he steps back. You take 1 breath, then 2, then you swing. It lands. The sound is less dramatic than you thought. No cinematic gush, no slow motion collapse. Just a wet, solid moment of surrender. The cow twitches once, then stills. Just like that. You step back, your knees already shaking. The journeymen nod, some with approval, some with a bit of surprise. One shrugs and says, "Better than I did. I cut my own boot." You don't laugh. You just stare at your gloves, wondering when they got soaked. The rest of the process takes hours. Skinning, gutting, dividing. You learn how to pull hide in one long strip without tearing. How to use your knife like an extension of your thumb. You learn that cows have 4 stomachs and all of them smell like boiled regrets. You learn, most importantly, how not to vomit when the intestines spill too fast and the bile splashes back. The journeymen make a game of it, of course. They toss kidneys into buckets, play guessing games with spleens. One offers you a bet. If you can tell cow tongue from ox, you don't have to mop today. You win. Barely. Your reward? You mop anyway. But now they call you lick tongue. It's meant affectionately. Sort of. Later that afternoon, a local priest stops by to bless the blade you used. He's sweating through his robes and smells faintly of onions. He waves incense around and mutters Latin. You feel no holier. But your master insists on it. Tradition, he says. Ever since the year of the meat curse, when 3 butchers allegedly turned into cows themselves after slaughtering on a Sunday. Most likely apocryphal, someone says. But the guild's not taking chances. Historians still argue whether the curse was ever real, or just an elaborate way to avoid working weekends. Either way, you nod along and hold the incense burner until your eyes water. By sundown, the cow is gone. In its place, cuts of meat ready for sale, a barrel of blood for sausage, a sack of bones bound for soup, and a strange, grim sense of accomplishment in your chest. You look at your hands again. They're not shaking now. And as you sweep up the last of the hoofs, you realize something uncomfortable. You might be getting used to this. The weight, the smell, the way life becomes pieces. That night, as you wash up outside, scrubbing your arms with ash and freezing water, you catch your reflection in a cracked metal plate. You look older, like someone who's watched a cow die and walked away with dinner plans. No one warned you how quickly that would happen. No one warned you that the smell wouldn't just fade. It would follow, like a shadow, or maybe like a badge. The market waits for no one, not even the barely conscious. You're up again before the sun, dragging a half-cured pig carcass on a wooden sled through streets that are more puddle than pavement. The sled squeaks like it's protesting the journey, and you can't really blame it. The morning fog hugs the cobbles like a damp second skin, and every few steps you feel your boots slipping. Les Halles looms ahead. Paris's great belly. You don't walk into it so much as get swallowed. Already, the square is filled with voices. Shouts, haggling, swearing. The Butcher's Guild has staked its corner, with barrels, tables, and a canvas tarp that sags under last night's rain. You're assigned the glamour job, hauling meat onto the slab, arranging it just so, and brushing away flies with a branch of rosemary tied to a stick. They hate rosemary, your journeyman says, chewing a strip of dried lump. Or they pretend to. Either way, you look busy. You've never seen this many people around raw meat before. Buyers prod it. Smell it. One elderly woman even pokes it with a knitting needle as if gauging its personality. You're not sure if this is about freshness or vengeance. A baker shouts something about price fixing. A fishmonger accuses your stall of encroaching. A monk tries to trade a prayer for a liver. Just another morning in Les Halles. You're too busy slicing fat off the back of a ham to notice the dog until it's already stolen the sausage links. The chase is instant. You leap over crates, bump a cart of radishes, and nearly collide with a mime, though no one would ever admit mimes existed in medieval Paris. The dog is clever, darting through legs and puddles until it stops just short of the Seine. It turns. You lunge. The links tumble to the mud, and the dog gives you a look, half apology, half admiration, and vanishes between two barrels like a ghost with excellent taste. You return to the stall, panting, filthy, and 2 sausages short. You'll do better tomorrow. Your master mutters, not looking up, or we'll use you for soup. By midday, your hands are pink from salt and cold, and your back aches from standing. A nobleman's servant approaches your stall, snapping his fingers. Our Lady requests a tender cut. Veal if you have it, not too bloody, and no gristle. The master glances at you. Go on, serve the delicate man. You nod and reach for the veal. As you wrap it in parchment, the servant sniffs. It doesn't smell perfumed. It smells like meat, you say, before you can stop yourself. He frowns. You apologize. The coin still lands in your palm, but the master raises an eyebrow later. Good instincts. Bad manners. You'll get there. Between customers. The journeymen teach you the fine art of stall whispering, telling stories to attract business. Best cut in Paris. Came from a pig that sang in its sleep. This cow once saw St. Denis himself. You can taste the vision in the shank. You try one. These kidneys are so fresh they still have opinions. It earns a laugh from a passing cobbler, who buys 2. Success. As the market winds down, you learn the worst part. Packing up. The tarp is heavier with blood and rain. The barrels leak. The straw is ruined. You load the remains of the day, bones, awful. Unsold cuts, back onto the sled. Your hands throb. Your nose is numb. But the final surprise comes when a guild official stops by with a clipboard, more of a plank with nails in it, and a sniff. Tithes due. The master points at you. So now you get to carry the payment, a bucket of suet and entrails, down the alley to the tax booth. You knock. A man opens it. Says nothing. Just lifts the lid and takes the bucket. He nods. You nod. This is your life now. On the way back, you pass a man preaching fire and brimstone near a tavern. He points at you, specifically you, and yells, "Repent, slaughterer of God's beasts." You blink, then shrug. You've been called worse. And besides, someone has to make the sausages. By nightfall, you're dragging the empty sled back through streets that smell of smoke and stale cider. Your hands are stained. Your tunic ruined. Your stomach empty. But as you pass a group of street urchins gnawing a charred bone you recognize from your own stall, you feel something strange. Pride? Or maybe just exhaustion wearing a hat. Either way, you walk home just a little taller. Just a little more butcher than boy. The slaughter shed is quieter than the shop. Not peaceful, just quieter. Like a cathedral where the sermons are screamed, not sung. It sits at the edge of the riverbank. Far enough to keep the worst of the blood out of the drinking water, but close enough for quick disposal when discretion is required. You arrive before dawn with a burlap sack of bones over your shoulder and a stomach that's already reconsidering this whole career path idea. The fog rolls in low, licking the ground like it's hungry too. The journeyman beside you, a man named Daniel who laughs too much at things that aren't funny, jabs your side. Ever see a cow's lungs inflate on their own? Stick around. Charming. Inside, The shed is lit by a few oil lamps that make the hanging carcasses look like ghosts caught mid-sentence. You count at least 5, 2 pigs, 1 sheep, 1 goat, and, at the far end, a massive, shaggy cow with a rope still knotted around one hoof. Its eyes are gone, the sockets stuffed with rags. Keeps the flies out, someone mutters, before you can ask. The master joins you, this time with his sleeves already rolled. He holds a cleaver that looks older than the building. You notice how he moves slower here, not out of fatigue but out of something like reverence or calculation. This is where the real work happens. Today's lesson is breaking the beast. That's the term they use. Sounds noble, almost knightly, until you realize it means snapping bones at the joint, carving through ligaments, dividing a creature into precise, sellable parts. It's anatomical, ritualistic, and in a way, it's strangely intimate. Your job? Hold the leg steady, which would be easier if the cow weren't the size of a kitchen cupboard and still slightly twitching. That's normal, Daniel says. Meat remembers. You listen closely. The blade enters with a wet pop, like stepping into a mud hole with bare feet. Then comes the tug, the twist, the snap, the sound that isn't quite bone and not quite wood but somewhere horrifyingly in between. You don't flinch. You want to, but you don't. Instead, you nod. Good, the master says. You're learning the language. There are markings on the bones, chalk lines, burned symbols, even a few carved initials. Daniel explains between jokes. Old codes, guild secrets, sometimes saints, sometimes curses. You laugh, unsure if he's joking. You stop laughing when he shows you a scapula inscribed with 3 crescent moons and a phrase in Latin. That one? They say it keeps the plague away. Does it work? Still here, aren't we? You don't ask again. Later, you're put on rendering duty. The offcuts, fat, gristle, tendons, glands, are thrown into a copper pot over low fire. You stir them slowly, carefully, until they melt into shimmering grease. The smell is indescribable, like hot butter that's been possessed by something that used to moo. Still, this is gold in your world. Tallow for candles, soap, lubricant for wagon wheels, and other things. Even the drippings matter. Nothing wasted, the master says. Not in this city. You watch the fat bubble and try not to think about how close your hands are to the heat, or how the smoke curls around your face like it knows your name. At midday, someone brings bread. You all eat sitting on barrels, legs dangling, hands still red. The journeymen tell stories. One claims to have seen a headless ox walk backward into the river. Another says he found a tooth the size of his thumb in a sheep's stomach once. Still carries it. Good luck charm. You ask if anyone's ever butchered something they couldn't explain. Silence. Then, there was a deer, someone mutters. Except it wasn't. No one pushes for more. You learn the rules quickly. Some animals aren't meant to be understood. In the afternoon, the bones are cleaned. You scrub femurs, boil skulls, saw through ribs with a rhythm that feels like a song. It's hard work, but there's something meditative about it, like sweeping away the past, layer by layer. One of the bones has a small hole drilled through it. For flutes, Daniel says. Some musicians only use cow bone. You hold it up, curious. Below in that, and the dead might answer, someone laughs. You don't try, but part of you wonders. By the end of the day, the shed smells less like blood and more like smoke and ash. The bodies are gone, the pieces sorted, the floor scrubbed. You step outside, face streaked with soot, hands sore, brain buzzing. The master pats your shoulder. That's the work. Break it down. Build it up. Just like us. You nod. And as you walk back toward the shop, lantern in one hand, bone shavings still caught in your collar, you realize something strange. You're starting to like it. Not the gore, not the stink, but the order and the chaos. The way death, here, makes sense. Like a language only a butcher learns to speak. The next morning, you dream of bones. Not in a terrifying, nightmarish way. No skulls chasing you down cobbled alleys or rib cages folding open like jaws. It's calmer than that. More like the bones are speaking, whispering in patterns. You don't remember the words when you wake up, only the feeling that you understood them. Then you blink, and you're back in your cot. Wrapped in the scent of tallow and smoke, with the distinct realization that your pillow smells faintly of offal. You get up anyway, because today is delivery day. You've never been to the Abbey before. Most apprentices don't go this early in their training. But today, the monks are hosting a feast. And someone has to haul a wheelbarrow of salted meat across half of Paris before noon. Guess who won the honor? Daniel waves you off with a grin and zero sympathy. Try not to offend the Virgin Mary with your smell. The cart is overloaded and lopsided, of course. Every cobblestone becomes a personal insult. The wheel squeaks with every rotation. Occasionally, a dog follows you, sniffing hopefully at the dripping burlap sacks. You consider naming it Optimism before shooing it away. The streets get nicer as you get closer to the religious quarter. Less sewage, fewer fights, more flowers and windowsills, and people who look at your apron like you're made of plague. You reach the abbey gates just as the bell tolls for terce. The monk at the door eyes your cart. Brother Bertrand is expecting kidneys. You nod, try to smile, and gesture to the bag marked with charcoal. He lifts it, opens it, stares. This smells like sin. You explain that everything smells like sin once it's been brined for 5 days in the basement barrel. He's not reassured. Inside, the kitchens of the abbey are shockingly busy. Novices are chopping root vegetables like their souls depend on it. One is crying into a bowl of leeks. A nun stirs a pot so large she has to stand on a crate to reach the bottom. The sin is rich, herbs, meat, something tangy you can't place. You stack the delivery near the door and linger too long, watching. Someone hands you a slice of warm bread with lard and rosemary. No questions asked. You take it like it's communion. As you turn to leave, you catch a glimpse through the archway into the cloisters. A few monks are singing softly. A funeral, maybe. Or a holy day you've forgotten. One holds a bone reliquary shaped like a finger. You wonder, briefly, if it's real. The master once told you. A butcher sees the same body a priest does, just from the inside out. The idea lingers. You go back to your cart and push on, the sun warming your shoulders, the streets beginning to bustle. Back at the shop, you're just in time for the rat problem. They're not shy anymore. A bold one dances across the floorboards like it pays rent. Another scurries across your boot. Dares you to flinch. It's the salted fat, your master grumbles. They like it more than we do. The solution? Cats. Not elegant, purring lap cats, butcher's cats. Scarred. Mean things with half an ear and the attitude of a knight in rusted armor. You bring in 2 from the alley, offering them a sliver of tongue as tribute. They accept. You've just made powerful allies. That afternoon, you learn how to sharpen blades properly. You've been doing it wrong, apparently. Too shallow an angle, too soft a stroke. Your knife isn't a feather, the master says. It's a question. Every cut asks something. You don't fully understand. But the way he speaks, low, slow. As he runs the edge along the whetstone, it feels like you're being invited into a secret. You try again. This time, you listen. You feel the drag, the catch, the whisper when it's finally sharp. A clean blade hums when it meets the air. Before closing, a woman arrives in widow's black. She asks for heart. Not a cut of meat, a whole heart. No questions. She places 3 coins on the table and says nothing else. You fetch the best one, wrap it tightly, and hand it over. She nods once and disappears into the dusk. You'll learn, Daniel mutters. Not every customer buys dinner. You don't ask. But that night, the whisper of bones returns in your dreams. And this time, they're humming the tune you heard in the abbey. By now, you've gotten used to the smell. That rich, sour, oddly warm scent that clings to your skin like a jealous spirit. It no longer surprises you when people wrinkle their noses as you pass. You just smile, because now you know they'd faint where you stand. You, apprentice to the block and cleaver, bearer of guts and tallow, you are resilient. But today, you're not in the shop. Today, you're going to the tanner's yard. It's the part of the job no one talks about until they absolutely have to. We don't waste hides, the master says, and someone has to haul them. That someone, predictably, is you. The hides are heavy and stiff, still slick with blood, and folded in a way that makes them feel disturbingly human. You load them onto a handcart that already creaks in protest, then set off toward the riverbank where the tanners work. Paris is already awake, coughing smoke into the air. A man on stilts shouts about eel pies. A child steals an onion from a cart and vanishes into an alley. You roll past all of it, trailing the slow perfume of ammonia and decay. You can smell the tannery before you see it. Imagine if wet dog and fermented cabbage had a baby, and then that baby grew up in a sewer. That's the scent. The yard is a maze of vats, some bubbling, some steaming, all suspicious. Men stand knee-deep in mixtures that look like soup for the deranged. One of them gestures to your load and points toward a pit lined with grayish liquid. Soak them there. Hair loosens faster. You do as told, dumping the hides into the mix. The splash is unfortunate. The worker laughs. You'll want to stand back. That's piss and lime. You learn quickly that tanning leather is less art and more alchemy powered by bodily fluids. Urine, brains, lye, even dog dung. It all plays a part. The secret, apparently, is in the balance. Too little ammonia, one tanner explains, and the hide stays soft. Too much, and you burn it, like overcooking a soul. He offers you a rag soaked in something unspeakable and tells you to scrub. You do, because this is the job, because someone has to turn death into utility. While scrubbing, you notice something strange, a piece of hide with a faint tattoo. It's hard to make out faded blue ink, curling around a patch of skin. Sailor, the tanner mutters. Fell off a ship near Rouen. Poor thing was still warm when they skinned him. You stare at him, waiting for a punchline. There isn't one. We use everything, he says, matter of fact. Even sinners have good leather. You nod. You wish you hadn't. By midday, your arms are sore, and your nose has given up entirely. You're invited to lunch, a generosity you immediately regret. It's eel pie and ale, eaten beside a vat of boiling bones. One of the tanners tells a story about a cowhide so thick it stopped a crossbow bolt. Another tells of a glove made from human skin that was gifted to a bishop. Still blessed it, someone laughs. Glove didn't burst into flames or anything. Maybe he didn't notice, you offer. Or maybe he liked the fit. More laughter. You chew slowly and try not to taste the eel. In the afternoon, you learn about stretching. The hides, once softened, are nailed to wooden frames and pulled taut until they dry like canvas. It's mesmerizing, watching the wrinkles disappear. The rawness flattened into something useful. You touch one, tentatively. It's warm from the sun, almost like skin. As the day wanes, you're tasked with hauling the scraped hair and flesh to the waste pit. It bubbles. It moves. It smells like something trying to come back to life. You tip the wheelbarrow in and step back. Careful, someone says. It splashed last week. Took out a chicken and a shoe. You decide not to ask for details. Back at the shop, no one comments on your new aroma. Daniel sniffs once and just says, Tanner's stench. Better than tax collector's perfume. You sleep that night with your arms aching and your dreams thick with strange textures. Wet leather. Floating symbols. The memory of that tattooed skin. You wake up suddenly, convinced someone whispered your name. But the room is empty. Just you, the dark, and the quiet creak of the bone handle knife beneath your bed. You start the day by cutting your thumb. Not on a cleaver or saw. Not even something noble like a butcher's hook. No, on a cabbage. A cabbage. You were slicing it for stew meat display. Lost in thought, when the paring knife slipped and drew a perfect crimson line across your thumb. Nothing major. Just enough blood to make your master shake his head. Can slice through tendon and hide. But cabbage wins the day, he mutters, handing you a cloth. Might as well let the vegetables run the place. You're in the back room for most of the morning. Gutting chickens. Dozens of them, fresh from the farm with feathers still clinging to their underbellies. Their warmth startles you. It's easier, somehow, when meat is cold, cleaner, quieter. But these birds still radiate heat. Still feel like they remember something. You work with your fingers and a dull knife, scooping intestines with a motion you've learned from repetition. Not comfort. The smell is sharper than pork or lamb, more pungent, earthy, full of barn and grit. Don't nick the bile sac, Daniel warns, leaning over. Unless you want the whole bird tasting like sadness. It's feather plucking that breaks your resolve. The tiny ones, near the wings, cling like they've made peace with death, but not with departure. You pull, and your fingertips go raw. Your nose itches from the fluff. You sneeze into a basin and nearly drop the carcass. Somewhere between sneezes, Daniel tosses you a jar. Render the fat. Chicken tallows good for pastry. Who's making pastry? We sell it to bakers. They don't ask questions. And neither should you. Fair enough. That afternoon, a fight breaks out in the square. Two rival butcher stalls, technically from outside the guild, have set up at the edge of Les Halle's. They're shouting about price, accusing each other of meat theft and sabotage. One of them tosses a ham like it's a rock. It hits a cart of apples. The apples retaliate by being very round and inconvenient. Within seconds, it's a full scuffle. You and your journeyman are ordered to stay out of it. Guild doesn't want blood on cobblestones. The master says, at least not the unpaid kind. Still, you watch from a distance. A pig snout sails through the air like a pale boomerang. Someone gets slapped with a trout. You're not sure who wins, but by the end, one of the rival stalls has vanished, and the other is mysteriously offering a sale on battle pork. Back at your shop, the mood is lighter. Daniel adds a chalkboard outside that reads, "No fighting, only freshness." Later, the city inspector comes by. She's small, wiry, with eyes like an owl and hands that never touch a thing they don't have to. She sniffs everything, taps the counters, asks questions you absolutely don't have answers to. Was this lamb locally raised? You nod. Where exactly? The field district? She writes something in her ledger. You brace for a fine, but instead, she says, keep the counters cleaner and get the apprentice gloves. She walks out without another word. You look at your hands, red, raw, feathered. Gloves would be nice. As the sun dips low, you help set up for tomorrow's salting. That means barrels. Lots of them. You mix brine in great swirling batches. Water, salt, bay leaves, pepper, sometimes a splash of wine. The meat is lowered in and sealed tight, like secrets tucked into oak coffins. Salt's a kind of memory, the master says. Keeps what matters. Throws out the rest. You nod, writing it down in your head. That night, you dream of barrels with eyes, and a chicken that whispers in Latin. You don't tell anyone about that part. The first sound you hear this morning is someone vomiting into a bucket. It's Daniel. Of course it's Daniel. That eel, he groans, clutching his stomach like it betrayed him. Or possibly the good ale that came after. You offer him a rag and a look of profound disapproval. He waves you off and mutters something about dying with dignity. Then he rolls under the workbench like a dog trying to avoid bath time. You get to work alone. Today is sausage day, which is less about cooking and more about alchemy. If you believe the journeyman, you're not just grinding meat, you're blending history, tradition, preservation, and, occasionally, horror. You start by turning the crank on a grinder older than your entire extended family. In go pork trimmings, veal scraps, a handful of something that might be liver, but also might be a dare. Out comes a thick, reddish paste that smells like salt and destiny. You stir in spices, pepper, garlic, coriander, a dash of nutmeg that makes you sneeze so violently the cats flee the room. Then comes the part you've been dreading, the casings. Let's be honest. No one is ever ready to handle pig intestines before breakfast. They're long, slick, and unsettlingly warm. You rinse them in water and vinegar, untangle the coils like cursed yarn, then slide them carefully onto the nozzle of the sausage stuffer. Go slow, says a voice from under the table, or you'll get an air bubble. And trust me, you do not want a sausage explosion. Sage advice from a man still cradling his stomach. You crank the lever, guiding the mixture into the casing like you're filling a balloon made of regret. It takes finesse, rhythm, a kind of squishy grace. You're bad at it at first, but by the third link, you're humming. By the fifth, you're proud. By the 10th, you've named one Bertrand and decided he looks trustworthy, while the sausages dry on racks. You clean the grinder and realize half your apron looks like a scene from a particularly intense opera. You also realize that today is inspection day for the charcuterie shelf. This is important. The guild sends a representative, a man named Jacques who wears a feathered cap and walks like he's constantly judging your posture. You've only met him once before. And he complimented your knife calluses like they were a personality trait. He arrives exactly at midday, sniffs a salami, taps the hams with one gloved finger, and frowns at the blood sausage. Too soft, he murmurs. You explain it hasn't finished curing. Neither have you, he replies. You're not sure if that was deep or just rude. He leaves without further comment. Daniel emerges from under the bench by late afternoon, pale but functional. He tastes one of the garlic sausages, declares it worthy of celebration, and promptly cuts 3 more for sampling. Don't trust a butcher who won't eat his own wares, he says, mouth full. That's what separates us from murderers. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. Presentation. Later. A customer arrives asking for a modest selection of charcuterie for a late-night poetry salon. You wrap cured slices, pack a jar of pickled tongue, and tuck in a complimentary sprig of rosemary. She tips you a silver coin and calls you an artisan of flesh. You think about that phrase for a long time after she leaves. That night, you sit by the salt barrels. watching the moonlight reflect off hanging sausages like weird little ornaments of survival. The cats curl at your feet, purring softly. Daniel snores upstairs, hopefully far from any eel. And in the quiet, you realize something strange. You don't miss your old life anymore. The rhythm of the knife, the hiss of fat in a pan, the proud clink of a coin dropped for your work. It's starting to feel like home, though you still refuse to name another sausage. Bertrand was enough. You wake before dawn to the sound of shouting in the street. That's not unusual. This is Paris, after all. But this time, it's not a drunken brawl or a wagon wheel stuck in a rut. It's a tax collector, and he's not alone. There's a certain kind of silence that follows the word levy, a kind of hush, like the meat itself is holding its breath. The collector stands at the threshold of your shop, eyes narrow, gloves spotless. 2 guards flank him, not armored, just bored. One's picking his teeth with a feather. The other looks like he's already imagining your meat pies in his lunch. By order of the crown, the man begins, unrolling a scroll as if it matters. A portion of all goods deemed non-essential shall be requisitioned for the support of His Majesty's forces in the Low Countries. In other words, he's taking your pork. You try to object. Daniel tries louder. The master doesn't speak at all, just folds his arms, jaw set like a meat press. In the end, the collector walks away with 3 salted hams, 2 links of sausage, and a wheel of the dried blood pudding that was meant for a widow's feast in Montmartre. You watch the goods disappear down the street like the worst kind of magic trick. The master finally sighs. War eats more than armies do, and you go back to your chores a little smaller. Mid-morning brings a welcome distraction, the market steward. Not because he's pleasant, he's not, but because he brings gossip. Heard the butcher down by Rue de Lombards accidentally pickled his own boot, he says, sorting through your tripe. Swears it was tender. He tells you about a merchant caught selling lamb painted with beet juice. About a baker who staged a flour riot just to raise prices. You ask how the city will survive the war. It won't, he shrugs. But at least we'll eat while it ends. Your next task is cleaning the chopping block. It's massive. Oak. Grooved like an old face. Every day, it absorbs stories, blood, sinew, bone, and every day you scrape it down like trying to erase history with salt and vinegar. As you scrub, you spot something carved into the wood. Better the blade than the crown. It's old, faint, not the master's hand. You wonder how long it's been there. Who wrote it? What they lost to taxes. That afternoon, a child comes in with a penny and a question. Do you have any bones? You raise an eyebrow. For soup, she clarifies. Or for practicing. You don't ask what she means by practicing. Instead, you give her a wrapped femur and a smile. She beams like you've handed her a treasure. You're nicer than the fishmonger, she says. He smells like old socks and death. So do we, you remind her. But you smile about it. She leaves humming. You stand there a moment, holding the coin like it's heavier than silver. As evening falls, the master calls you over. He's carving something delicate, bone, from the look of it. A handle for a knife, maybe. Tiny shapes etched in with the tip of a heated awl. Everyone leaves something behind, he says. Meat disappears. Bones stay. He hands you a small piece of horn. Carve something, if you like. Nothing fancy, just yours. You sit under the oil lamp and scratch the surface with quiet care. A symbol, a letter, a crooked smile. Something no tax collector can take. That night, you dream of an endless banquet hall. Empty plates, empty chairs, and one sausage sitting in the place of honor. Its name is Bertrand, and somehow it nods. There's a frost on the window this morning. Not snow, just that thin, lacy silver that makes everything feel quieter. The kind of morning where your breath fogs up the glass and the cleavers feel colder than bone. You wrap your hands in a linen rag before touching the iron. Daniel is still upstairs, mumbling through his dreams like he's negotiating with ghosts. The master's sharpening a blade, slow and steady. Today is awful day. There's no glamour in awful. No poetic marbling of fat. No rosy slices for display. Just guts, glands, and all the odd little pieces most people don't like to think about while they chill. Your job? Sort and clean the day's harvest. Livers, hearts. Kidneys, lungs, each with its own texture, smell, stubbornness. The butcher who respects the organs, the master once said, respects the beast. You think about that as you scrape a lung that whistles faintly when you squeeze it. Not creepy at all. There's a regular who comes only on awful days. A quiet woman, always in green, who buys tripe and sweetbreads with exact change. You try to smile at her today, but she just nods, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. Storm's coming, she murmurs. Best cook while the fire's still kind. Then she's gone, trailing sage and mystery behind her. You stand there holding coins that feel a little too warm. Lunch is a kind of stew the journeyman calls courage soup, because if you know what's in it, you need courage to eat it. Still, it's hot and filling, and tastes better than most of the street carts. Daniel insists the secret is clove. The master says it's boiling everything until it gives up. You're starting to think they're both right. Later, the tannery sends a boy to fetch bones. He's about your age, but thinner, nails stained black, eyes yellowed from smoke. He asks for femurs specifically, the long ones still smooth. We're making handles today, he says. No point wasting good marrow. You help him load the sack. He pauses before leaving. You ever see them take a horse apart? You blink. Fastest thing I've ever seen. Quicker than fear. Then he grins and walks off, sack swinging like a pendulum behind him. You make a mental note. Don't look too long at horses. The day ends with tongues. Dozens of them, boiled and skinned. You learn to peel the outer layer off in one smooth motion, like slipping a glove from a sleeping hand. It's strangely satisfying if you ignore the way they flop onto the tray like they're trying to whisper a final word. You weigh them, wrap them, stack them in neat rows. One of them looks too human. You turn it upside down, just in case. After dark, Daniel lights a tallow lamp and begins carving again. This time it's bone buttons, smooth and round. He flicks one toward you. For your coat. When winter's worse than work. You thank him, turning it over in your hand. There's a faint mark on it, a circle within a circle. A quiet little signature. Everyone leaves something behind. He echoes. You think of lungs that whistle, tongues that twitch, buttons that remember fingers. That night, your dreams are quiet. No sausages, no dancing offal. Just the silence of frost creeping across a chopping block and the warmth of soup waiting for courage. And far away, the woman in green humming over a fire that hasn't gone out. The sky is bruised with rain before you even step outside. Not a downpour, just the slow, steady kind that seeps into your bones and makes every breath feel like it's been soaked in smoke. The gutters gurgle, the stones gleam, and your boots are already wet. Inside the shop, everything smells like iron and vinegar. It's delivery day. You begin by hauling slabs of meat onto the cart. Not the prime cuts. Those are for dignitaries and priests. But the heavy stuff. Ribs, shanks, half a cow's head wrapped in linen. Your hands slip on the wet wood. Daniel tosses you a strip of waxed cloth to wrap the handles. Last time I slipped, I kissed a pig's tooth, he says. Still dream about it. The route is simple, down Rue de Marmozettes, across the Seine, and into the tangle of alleys behind the old convent. Simple, but not easy. Your first stop is the tavern near the church. It smells like beer, sweat, and overcooked onions. The innkeeper is already yelling at someone before you knock. He opens the door with a scowl, wipes his hands on an apron that might once have been white. Where's the marrow bones? Rain delayed us. Rain delayed God. Boy, and he still managed a resurrection. You hand him the wrapped bundle and he snorts. At least it's not eel. Had 3 customers choke on bones last week. You don't ask if they survived. Next is the apothecary. She orders pig's feet and a jar of suet, claims they're for medicinal balms. You watch her weigh everything with dainty brass scales, then stir a greenish mixture in a clay pot that smells like rosemary and regret. Tongue makes good tincture for liars, she jokes. Not looking up, you nod slowly, reconsidering every conversation you've ever had. She gives you 2 copper coins and a dried lavender sachet. For your boots, she says, or your dreams, whichever needs it more. The last stop is the orphanage. You weren't told to deliver there, but the master gave you a wrapped parcel this morning and said, simply, they'll know. The building is quiet, stone cold and damp. A nun answers the door, eyes tired, sleeves rolled. Meat. You nod. Hand her the bundle. She unwraps it gently. Oxtail, soup bones. Scraps that will make stew for 20. No questions. No blessings. Just a nod and a door closed softly. You walk away a little lighter. Back at the shop, the rain has worsened. Everything is slick. You nearly slip carrying a bucket of blood for pudding. Daniel catches it, barely, then mutters something about building a boat from sausage links. The master doesn't laugh. If it floods again, we will float the charcuterie case. You glance at the hams hanging near the rafters and try to picture a fleet of meat-based vessels. You fail. Evening arrives with thunder in the distance. You spend the last hour rendering fat. Huge chunks of pork belly melted down in iron pots, slowly turning into liquid gold. The smell is rich, almost sweet. The kind of scent that lingers in your hair no matter how often you wash. Daniel sings softly as he stirs. Not a song you know, but it fits. By the time you scrub your hands clean, the rain has stopped. The city glows, slick and shining, reflections of lanterns dancing in puddles. You watch one of your sausages float briefly down the gutter like a strange, proud boat. You don't even chase it. It sails past, wobbling, before vanishing into the night. Somewhere, Bertrand would be proud. It's market day, which means chaos. Before sunrise, Rue de la Ferronnerie is already a parade of elbows and elbows pretending to be entire people. Merchants jostle for corners, dogs bark at wheels. And you've been awake for precisely 11 minutes when a cabbage rolls under your foot and nearly ends your life. Killed by produce, Daniel mutters, hauling you upright. A fate worse than taxes. You nod, brush off your apron, and prepare for what the guild lovingly calls the meat showcase. The shop doesn't open today. Instead, the guild assigns stalls in the open-air square, right alongside bakers, fishmongers, and the world's loudest cheese seller. Your card is modest: sausages, cured meats, bone broths, and sealed clay jugs. But the star of the table is a new experiment. Blood jelly. It's glossy, burgundy, and wobbling with theatrical flair. It's elegant, Daniel offers, squinting. Like murder with a hat. You tell him to stop describing food like a crime scene. He does not. People swarm the stalls like wasps around sugar. A noblewoman asks for the softest tongue, please, while fanning herself with lace and moral superiority. A soldier buys a handful of dried sausage and tucks them into his boot. A child trades 2 buttons and a prayer for marrow bones. The guild steward passes by, gives your stall a glance, and nods once. Approval. You try not to beam. We're not the best, Daniel says, but we're the ones with flair. You add a sprig of thyme to a packet just for drama. Halfway through the day, a commotion breaks out near the spice vendor. You can't see it all, just a flash of red, the sound of arguing, and the unmistakable splatter of something hitting someone's tunic. Daniel cranes his neck. Is that our jelly? You push through the crowd just in time to see a pickpocket being pelted with your blood jelly by an enraged baker. Apparently, the thief stole a purse and fled through your stall, knocking over a bowl. The baker retaliated with food-based justice. Effective, you murmur. Sticky, he replies. You consider launching a marketing campaign. Justice you can spread. The afternoon sun is warm but mild. You sit on the edge of the cart, chewing a heel of bread and listening to nearby sellers shout their wares like opera singers on a deadline. A man walks by selling pickled walnuts. A woman hawks eel pies with questionable enthusiasm. One of your sausages begins to melt in the sun. You name it Gerard and gently rotate him into the shade. Sausage is art, you whisper. No one argues. By sundown, you've sold nearly everything. Only 2 jars of suet remain, and one of them is leaking. You begin to pack up, hands sticky, face flushed. Daniel hums as he ties the barrels. Someone tosses you a crust of plum tart as thanks for a good deal. You don't even ask what was in it. Back at the shop, the master waits by the door. You brought back the cart. And the dignity. Daniel adds, well, one of those is useful. The master disappears inside without further commentary. You close the shutters just as the lamps flicker on. Outside, the city sighs, tired but full. Like a beast fed for one more day. You sit on the floor, chewing plum tart, and think about how little it takes to feel proud. A nod, a clean stall, a jelly that made headlines. Gerard, you decide, was a martyr. He'll be remembered in tomorrow's stew. There's a knock at the door before dawn. 3 short taps, then 1 long. You and Daniel freeze, because no one knocks like that unless they mean trouble or they mean to pay well for silence. Turns out, it's both. A man steps inside, hooded, hands gloved, eyes like the edge of a well, deep and not inviting. He carries a wrapped parcel and speaks low. I need a cut. Not for display. Just clean, quiet, precise. You exchange a glance with Daniel. This has the unmistakable scent of politics and also maybe treason. But the man drops a coin pouch that lands with the sound of your rent being paid for 2 months. You nod. The parcel contains a whole boar's head. Unusual, but not unheard of. What is strange is the note pinned to its ear. A list of cuts, numbered, measured to the gram. He wants the tongue, the cheek, and the brain, Daniel mutters. So either he's a gourmet or a threat to national security. You sharpen your knife and start. It's delicate work. Boar meat is tougher than pig, more sinewed. And the skull is thick, like it knows too many secrets. You separate the tongue with a careful curve of the blade. The cheek slides free with a wet sound you choose to forget. The brain is last. It requires a small saw, patience, and a kind of moral compromise you didn't realize you were prepared to make. When the pieces are ready, you wrap them in waxed cloth and place them in a wooden box. The man says nothing. He leaves the pouch and takes the meat. This never happened, he says. What never happened? You reply. That earns you the tiniest nod of respect. Later, you wash your hands for a long time. Longer than usual. Just until they stop feeling like they're still holding something. Daniel breaks the silence by tossing you a heel of bread and a slice of smoked sausage. Breakfast, he says. Assuming we're still legally people. Mid-morning, a group of noblemen enters the shop. They're loud, perfumed, and clearly intoxicated on either brandy or the sound of their own voices. One demands a tour of the sausage vault, while another pokes a ham like it insulted his boots. This one's got character, he declares. You can smell the despair. You quietly redirect them to the cheese stall 2 streets over. Let the cheesemonger deal with that kind of existentialism. As they leave, one drops a silk handkerchief. You pick it up, about to return it, until you notice something embroidered in the corner. A symbol that matches the seal on this morning's boar parcel. Your spine goes cold. Daniel peers over your shoulder. What did I say about politics? That we're not in them. Exactly. So put that down and go salt something. You do. But you don't forget. The rest of the day is oddly calm. You brine pork belly, stir spice into a new sausage blend, and test a batch of broth so rich it might inherit land. The master tastes it, grunts in approval, and goes back to boning a shoulder. Even the cats are quiet. You carve a new button from bone in the evening, something simple, a crescent moon. You tuck it into your apron pocket without knowing why. That night, you dream of the boar's head again. But this time it speaks. It asks what kind of cuts you prefer. And its voice sounds eerily like Daniel, asking if you want your despair with mustard or horseradish. You wake to the smell of smoke, not the dangerous kind, but the kind that means meat is being cured in the back room and someone forgot to open the flue. You stumble downstairs, coughing slightly, eyes stinging, and find Daniel fanning the air with a chopping board. It's not a fire, he says. It's an ambience. You cough again. He shrugs. Smoked despair pairs beautifully with salted sarcasm. Today is Preservation Day. That means everything smells like brine, vinegar, and slowly rendered fat. The master has you layering cuts into heavy clay jars, alternating with salt, herbs, and juniper berries. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. Nothing makes you appreciate meat like knowing how to keep it from rotting. This one's for January, he says, sealing the jar. This one's for the bishop. And this one's just in case things go bad. Worse than now? You ask. They can always go worse, he replies, deadpan. He's not wrong. You're tasked with smoking sausage links next. You've done it before, but today the coals are too hot, and the humidity too high. Everything drips more than it should. You swear one of the sausages winked at you. Daniel insists it's just steam. Or maybe the spirits of meat passed, he adds. You never know with pork. You ignore him and rotate the rack. But you do whisper an apology to the sausage, just in case. In the afternoon, a woman arrives with a basket of herbs. She's not a customer, she's a barterer. She offers bundles of rosemary, thyme, and something that smells like crushed forests. In exchange for a few ounces of lard, you trade without question. For poultices, she explains. And for curses, depending. She leaves you a sprig of rue to keep the rot away. You hang it by the door, just in case. As you're scraping tallow from the kettles, the journeyman tells you about a butcher who once cured an entire deer by accident, left it in salt. Forgot about it, and dug it up 5 months later thinking it was a sack of flour. Still edible, he says. Mostly. You ask what happened to it. Send it to the king. Which one? The one who died young. You pause. Because of the deer? He shrugs. Historians are still arguing about that. That evening, you and Daniel experiment with a new sausage blend. You mix pork with dried apple, cracked pepper, and something called bishop's spice that smells both holy and suspicious. The casing splits once, but the second batch holds. The master tries a bite, chews thoughtfully. Not bad, he says. Try not to poison anyone. Only nobles, Daniel replies. They're the easiest to digest, you add. The master doesn't laugh, but he doesn't stop you either. Before bed, you sweep salt from the floor and oil the cleavers. You light a taper by the curing rack, where hundreds of links sway like wind chimes in a cave. There's comfort in the order of it all, the routine, the craft, the knowledge that even in chaos, something is being preserved. You stare at the links for a while. One of them still looks like it's winking. You nod back, just to be polite. The city stinks of mud and horses today. A storm passed through in the night, leaving the streets half-flooded and entirely unrepentant. Slop from the gutters flows like wine for the damned. You step outside and immediately regret every decision involving your boots. At least we're not fishmongers, Daniel mutters, pulling the cart behind you. Their stock gets fresher in this. He's not wrong. A mackerel floats by, judging you with one glazed eye. Today is collection day, which means you're gathering scraps from taverns, kitchens, and anyone who owes the guild favors or meat. It's a delicate art, part diplomacy, part scavenging, part pretending you don't see rats the size of cats. Your first stop is a tavern where the cook greets you with a grin and a bucket. Yesterday's bones, day before's gristle, and something that might be duck. Might. Depends on your standards. You nod solemnly. Standards are flexible when soup's involved. At the second stop, a baker hands you a bag of stale bread ends. Not meat, but you trade a marrow bone for them anyway. Bread makes sausage go further. The master calls it padding with poetry. Daniel calls it cheating with carbs. You call it lunch. One alley in the market district reeks more than the others. You find the reason. A butcher's apprentice from another shop has oversalted a side of beef, and now it's sweating like it knows it did something wrong. He's trying to scrape it down and start over. You offer help, mostly to avoid watching him cry into brisket. We all ruin a cut once, you tell him. The trick is not doing it in front of anyone important. He sniffles, nods, and offers you the trimmings as thanks. They're mostly fat. You accept anyway. Fat can be redeemed. Back at the shop. The master is boiling bones. The pot hisses with something dark and fragrant, peppercorns, bay leaf, something that smells faintly of redemption. He's muttering about marrow yield percentages and steam angles. Broth is the soul of a butcher, he says. The rest is just noise. You stir gently and pretend you're not a little inspired. Later, a customer arrives with a question, not a purchase. What's the difference, she asks, between a butcher and a cook? You pause. Daniel replies. One hides the mess. The other turns it into dinner. She laughs, but there's something thoughtful behind it. She buys a smoked tongue and leaves without another word. As night falls, you take inventory. Not of the meat, of the scraps, the rinds, the cracked bones, the half-saved cartilage. These, the master says, are where the real lessons lie. The discarded becomes delicious. The forgotten becomes fundamental. Even gristle has a future if you treat it right. You close the shutters, hang up your apron, and light a single taper in the window. Outside, the gutters still burble. The city sighs. And somewhere out there, a mackerel dreams of drier days. You curl into bed with the smell of broth on your sleeves and salt behind your ears. Sleep comes slow, but steady, like good stock. You wake up sore. Not the satisfying. I lifted something heavy and lived to tell the tale sore, but the kind that comes from bending over barrels for too long and sleeping on a mattress that remembers the Black Death. Daniel greets you with a sympathetic wince and a cup of something hot. It's tea, he says, or possibly dishwater with ambition. You drink it anyway. Today, the master assigns you to the rendering room. It's where fat goes to change, where animal trimmings melt into tallow, where the air hangs heavy with grease and time. You open the iron door and are hit with a wall of heat and smell. Sweet, earthy, rich, like someone fried a ghost. This is where candles are born, Daniel says behind you. And also heartbreak. Rendering is slow work. You slice beef fat into smaller chunks, drop them into cast iron pots, and stir until they sigh into liquid. Bits of crackling float to the top, golden, bubbly. Oddly beautiful. You strain them through linen and jar the tallow while it's still warm. One jar slips. You catch it, barely. One slip, and it's soup of you, Daniel warns, mopping the floor. You nod. Extra careful now. This isn't the kind of mistake you get to make twice. In the corner of the room stands the soap barrel. It's where old tallow gets mixed with ash lye and boiled down into bricks that will, someday, scrape blood off hands and gild off hearts. You stir it carefully. The smell is sharp, alkaline, like burnt paper and regret. They say soap saved more lives than swords, Daniel mutters. Depends who's swinging the sword. You both chuckle, and then pretend you don't see the rat watching from the rafters. Midday brings a visitor, the tallow merchant. She's dressed like a nun, but curses like a sailor. She inspects your jars, weighs them with one hand, and tests a sample with her pinky finger like it's wine. Decent melt, low impurity, good clarity, she mutters. Then she bites into a piece of crackling. Could use more salt. She leaves you with a pouch of coin and a warning. Don't let it scorch. Burnt tallow's only good for lighting riots. You write that down. Twice. By afternoon. The heat is unbearable. Your clothes stick to you. Your hair smells like a medieval kitchen fire. You fan the doorway with a wooden tray and consider crawling into a pot of fat just to cool down. Daniel fans you with a rib bone. The scent of suffering. Oh, to sausage. You flick him with a towel. Evening brings relief. The air cools. The light softens. You ladle the last of the day's yield into jars and watch as they cloud into soft white. The master inspects your work and grunts. Good. We'll sell half. Keep the rest for candles. He eyes your hands, slick with tallow. Rub some on your boots. Might keep the rats from laughing. You do. You're not sure it helps. At bedtime. Your pillow smells like roasted fat and rosemary. You fall asleep thinking of candles and cauldrons, of strange fires and patient work. The kind that doesn't glow fast, but glows for a long time. Rain taps against the shutters as you wake. Not the dramatic, stormy kind. This is a fine, steady drizzle, the sort that makes bread go soft and tempers even the angriest shopkeeper. You breathe it in like a blessing. After yesterday's tallow heat, the chill feels like silk. Perfect weather for awful, Daniel says, holding up a burlap sack that leaks slightly. You raise an eyebrow. Everything's perfect weather for awful if you lie hard enough, he shrugs. Today is organ sorting day. You've seen livers and hearts before, but this is the full spread. Kidneys, spleens, lungs, stomachs, some still steaming, some stubbornly uncooperative. The smell is a pungent mix of metal, earth, and mild regret. The master shows you how to check for freshness, color, firmness, bloodline clarity. You pretend to know what he means. Daniel tries to whisper a joke about a spleen that looks like your landlord. You ignore him. Mostly. Liver goes fast. Everyone wants it. The students for strength, the old women for memory, the nuns because they say it wards off nightmares. One customer insists that cooked properly with onions, liver can heal heartbreak. Or cause it, she adds, chewing thoughtfully. You sell her 2 slabs. Stomach is trickier. You clean them in vinegar, salt, then scrape them smooth with the back of a knife. It's slow work, almost surgical. If this doesn't turn me into a saint, Daniel mutters. I demand a statue in the alley. One with pigeons on your head. Obviously. You accidentally splash vinegar in his eye. You're not sorry. A priest arrives near midday. He wants lungs. For incense, he says. Or study. Or both. You don't ask. He pays in silver and smells faintly of candle smoke and secrecy. As he leaves, he whispers. The spleen remembers things the brain has forgotten. You blink. He's gone. You and Daniel look at each other. We're not putting that on a sign, you say. Too late, he grins. I'm carving it into the wall. The rest of the day drips by with the rain. You sort hearts into sizes. The small ones make you sad. The large ones make you suspicious. You wrap everything in waxed paper and arrange them like strange fruit in trays of sawdust. The master says the lungs must go tonight. They don't keep. You and Daniel load the cart at dusk and deliver them to the apothecary on Rue Montmorency. She greets you with a smile too wide and gives you each a candied pear. For the effort, she says. What's in it? You ask. Mostly hope. It tastes like honey and something unpronounceable. Back home, you scrub your hands twice. You can still feel the texture of tripe between your fingers. The rain hums gently on the rooftop. You sit by the window, watching the city smear itself into fog, into shadows, into quiet. And in the corner of the room, Daniel carves something new into the butcher's bench. The spleen remembers. You don't stop him. The fog is so thick this morning, you could slice it and sell it by weight. It curls around your boots as you walk, seeps through the cracks in the shutters, and blurs the corners of the shop like a dream someone forgot to finish. Daniel says it's the city trying to hide its sins. Or maybe just its breath, you mutter, trying not to slip on the stones. Inside, the air is warmer barely, but thick with spice and smoke. Today is sausage stringing day, and you, lucky you, have been gifted the job of stuffing intestines. It starts simple. Grind the meat, season the mix, feed it into casings. The rhythm is almost soothing, like embroidery, but wetter and with more consequences. You've got pork with sage, lamb with cinnamon. A strange mix Daniel swears includes rose petals and regret. You don't ask. If I told you, you'd dream weird again, he warns. Too late. The casings come from a delivery boy who looks like he hasn't slept in 3 weeks. He hands over the bundles of cleaned intestines like holy relics, wrapped in muslin and salt. If you drop these, I'm legally allowed to scream, he says. You don't drop them, but you do imagine what screaming in a butcher shop would echo like. Probably poetic, possibly terrifying. Stringing sausages is delicate work. Too much tension, and they burst. Too little, and they sag like forgotten prayers. You find a rhythm, twist by twist, link by link. Your hands move on their own, like they remember better than your mind does. Even the master gives a grunt of approval when he walks by. That one looks like it might survive the winter. High praise. Midday, a young boy appears at the door. He watches the process wide-eyed, nose pressed to the glass. You beckon him inside and hand him a small dried sausage. His eyes go wider. Do I eat it or worship it, he asks. Both, you say? He bows solemnly and disappears into the fog. By afternoon, the drawing room is full. Hundreds of links, hanging like wind chimes of flesh. You inspect the rows, shadows of future meals, saved moments, hard work on display. Daniel strings a heart-shaped link and grins. For the romantic butcher, he declares, if I ever get married. You reply, serve that instead of cake. You both laugh, but the master nearby just mutters, only if your spouse has good teeth. As evening settles, you clean the meat grinder, an ancient thing made of iron and stubbornness. It creaks like it knows stories no one dares write down. You oil the gears, wipe the blades, and whisper a small, thank you. Tools deserve that, sometimes. That night, the shop smells of smoke, spice, and just a hint of triumph. You hang your apron, stretch your fingers, and sit by the window. The fog is still out there, but inside, rows of perfect links sway in the warm air like soft bells. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you dream not of blood or bones, but of steam rising from sausage in a pan. And no one screaming. Just quiet. Just warmth. You're woken by bells. Not church bells, not warning bells, just the clatter of the apprentice from 2 streets over dropping a tray of trotters into the gutter. Again, Daniel leans out the window. That's the 3rd tray this week, he calls. You building a shrine? Or just feeding ghosts? The boy mumbles something about bad grip and scurries off. You stretch. So we're in places that shouldn't exist and wonder if today will involve fewer intestines. It does not. The master has decided today is for blood pudding. You blink. Again? The bishop liked the last batch, he says. Now his cousin wants one the size of a cartwheel. You picture that. Immediately regret it. Daniel groans. We're going to smell like regret and cloves for 3 days. Blood is tricky business. It must be fresh, stirred constantly, kept from clotting. It needs oats, onions, spices, and a steady hand, not to mention courage and an iron stomach. You measure everything, slow and deliberate, as the pot simmers. 1 wrong move, and it curdles. 2 wrong moves, and the smell follows you into your next life. You whisper encouragement to the mix. Stay smooth. Stay kind. Don't embarrass me. Midway through, the shop cat leaps onto the counter. You both freeze. Don't you dare, Daniel hisses. The cat, sensing chaos, dips 1 paw into the blood and immediately flicks it at the wall. Now there's a splatter shaped like a bishop. You take it as a sign. It's ordained, Daniel says solemnly. We serve the pudding. While the pudding cools, a customer arrives asking for something poetic. You hand him a slice of smoked tongue and a jar of pickled hearts. He nods. Perfect, he says. Dinner with my mother-in-law. You don't ask. You never ask. In the courtyard behind the shop, a neighbor is boiling rags. The scent drifts in old linen and rosemary. Plague blankets, Daniel mutters. She thinks they ward off fevers. You glance at your blood-stained apron and wonder if that counts. Historians still argue whether any of it worked. Faith, fumes, superstition. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe it just made people feel braver while they waited. You hang a sprig of sage above the oven, just in case. Evening comes, and the pudding is finally set. Thick, dark, glistening like midnight secrets. You cut a slice, fry it with onions, and taste. It's haunting. Daniel says it tastes like melancholy and cloves. The master says it'll do. That night, you scrub the cat's paw print off the wall. You fail, so you leave it. Maybe the bishop will see it as divine approval. Maybe not. The street outside is slick with mist. Somewhere, a cart creaks under the weight of meat no one asked for, but everyone needs. You light a taper, breathe in the iron scent of the day, and let the shop hum around you like a quiet lullaby made of salt. Smoke and secrets. The wind has changed. It whistles through the cracks in the shutters, sharp and restless, like the city's exhaling centuries of tired breath. You feel it in your joints before your feet touch the floor, something shifting. Not the kind you write about, but the kind you notice when you've swept the same floor too many times. Daniel's already awake, sitting by the fire, holding a knife that needs sharpening. You know what a day is? He asks. You shake your head. Delivery day, he says. Final one of the season. Ah, the noble house across the river. The one with the marble lion out front and a cook who demands her bones be sanded smooth and her sausage links weighed like gold. You sigh. The cart is loaded with the best of everything. Veal marrow wrapped in muslin, gooseneck stuffed with spice and rice, a barrel of tripe stewed in wine. You've even brought a jar of blood pudding, the good batch, the one the bishop didn't get. The city feels thinner as you walk. Streets you've known all your life suddenly seem stretched, drained of noise, like a painting left too long in the sun. Maybe it's just winter, Daniel says. But you wonder. At the estate, everything gleams. Copper, lace, velvet. You feel out of place. Like a soup pot in a stained glass chapel. The head cook meets you with a nod. It better be hot, she says, opening the first basket. It's steaming, Daniel replies, like your temper. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't throw you out either. Success. As she inspects the goods, a young servant girl pulls you aside. You're the one who makes the heart pies, she whispers. You nod. I wrote a song about them, she beams. And before you can stop her, she sings it, off-key, joyful, slightly disturbing. It is, without question, the best review you've ever received. Back at the shop, the master is quiet. He watches you unload the cart, checks the list, and finally, after a long pause, says, You're ready. You blink. For what? He just shrugs. To make the cuts that matter. You look at the cleaver, the table, the hooks, the scales. You've been making them for months, but this is the first time it feels like they were yours. Daniel brings out a bottle of something he claims is wine. It's red, he says. Close enough. You toast with chipped cups, surrounded by sausages hanging like streamers and bones stacked like altars. You eat leftover tongue and burnt bread and laugh until your ribs ache. Remember the pudding fire? Daniel grins. Which one? Exactly. Later, as the fire dies low, you walk through the shop one last time tonight. Past the hooks, past the salt barrels, past the knife rack with one space still empty. You hang up your apron. You run your fingers along the butcher's bench, over Daniel's carvings, some funny, some obscene, one shaped like a spleen. And then you step outside. The city breathes. You close your eyes and let the scent of meat and memories wrap around you like a thick, savory fog. And when you lie down to sleep, it isn't to the noise of blood or clanging knives. It's quiet now, gentle, ancient, the way dreams should begin. Ancient memories closed. Tonight is yours. Good night.